أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وبه نستعين وهو خير ناصر ومعين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. أما بعد, my respected elders, my dearest youngsters, brothers and sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. There is a lot of talk going on in our communities about reform these days and how we should deal with it. How should we approach the reformist voices who are pinpointing and identifying and highlighting certain things within our belief system, within our practices, that may not be exactly in line with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has stated in the Quran and what the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt alayhimu salatu wassalam practically exemplified and demonstrated through their teachings and their seerah and sunnah. How do we deal with this? Recently, there was a respected scholar with traditional leanings who delivered a majlis about this, a lecture in which he tried to offer nasiha to our community members on how to deal with this. There are many aspects of this lecture that we actually appreciate and also even agree with, and others that we disagree with. And alhamdulillah, the purpose of all of this is to have academic engagement. So there's no problem in having healthy differences of opinion and even disagreements if we can learn to disagree without being disagreeable. So this is one thing that we appreciated in the presentation of this respected speaker, is that he was very calm and cool in his presentation. He was not agitated, foaming or frothing at the mouth, as you see in the case of some of the street level speakers and less learned speakers, unfortunately. In his case, he made a presentation that was calm and cool and composed, and he actually even appealed to the public. One of his biggest points to the public was, whenever you hear something that you're not familiar with, that sounds strange to you, there is no need to get excited. Unfortunately, a lot of people tend to be very emotional, they're very easily excitable. So when they hear something new or something that seems strange to them, or something they don't like, they just get agitated and excited and angry and upset, and they have a knee-jerk reaction, which is not the way of a mu'min and a believer and a servant who is approved by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah, when He talks about His approved servants, He describes them in Surah Az-Zumar by saying, الَّذِينَ يَسْتَمِعُونَ الْقَوْلَ. When something is said, they listen to it. They're good listeners. الذين يستمعون القول فيتبعون أحسنه أولئك الذين هداهم الله وأولئك هم أولو الألباب. Allah says the people who, when something is said, they listen to it. But listening doesn't mean that you necessarily have to accept it. No. When it comes to following, يتبعون أحسنه. They don't just follow everything they hear and listen. They follow the best of what they listen and the best of what they're told. أولئك الذين هداهم الله. These are the people whom Allah has guided. وأولئك هم أولو الألباب. And these are the people who possess intellects. These are the people who are using their intellect. So it's very important that whenever something is said, you hear it out in full, you try to understand it, and then you make an informed decision. Not that you hear what other people are saying about it, what third parties are claiming about it, and then based on that you just blindly follow and trust what's being said. Rather, you should make an effort and attempt to investigate what is being said, and even if what is being said is something that you're not familiar with, that you don't like, that goes against what you have been led to believe, that goes against what you are brought up on, there's no need to get excited and agitated and lose your cool, but rather you can reflect over it. There are other ways around it. There are other approaches that are much more academic and much more fair and much more balanced. The Quran encourages dialogue and engagement with people from other faiths. And it doesn't tell you that when someone comes and tells you something that goes against your faith or your belief, that you should get angry at that person, or that you should badmouth and character assassinate that person, attack that person, launch ad hominem attacks against that person. This is not something that the Quran teaches you. Rather, the Quran teaches you to engage in dialogue with the best. وَلَا تُجَادِلُوا أَهْلَ الْكِتَابِ إِلَّا بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا مِنْهُمْ. Do not argue and debate and discuss with the Ahlul Kitab except with that which is the best. Follow the best approaches in your engagements Yes, except with those who are out and out zalimeen, who are wrongdoers, and who are zalim. So for them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala excludes them. But when you're engaging with genuine, normal, regular people, there's no need for that. I recall how when we were in Swaziland, for example, or even Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, so many times Christian missionaries would come to our house. Jehovah's Witness would come to our house. And they would present their beliefs, which obviously are diametrically different in many cases from what we believe. Jehovah's Witness don't believe in Jahannam. And they sit down and, if they say we don't believe in Jahannam, we say, oh, you're going against the Musallamat. We have qat'i proof from Allah that Jahannam, you will go to Jahannam because this is not the way to go about this. So we sit down with them, we discuss, okay, why don't you believe in Jahannam? Say, Allah is so merciful, He's so Rahim, He's so Kareem. How can He put anyone in Jahannam? So then we sit down and we explain to them, we say, okay, but what about you yourself can see how much crime is going on in this society, how people are rebelling against Allah, how people are oppressing their own fellow human beings. There is genocide happening in this world. There are dictators brutally murdering, slaughtering, massacring their own populations. So much injustice in this world. Ar-Rahim and Kareem and merciful, loving Lord. You expect Him to just sit quiet on this and not punish the perpetrators of all of this? So khair, my point is not to go into a debate with the Jehovah's Witness, but to show you that, yeah, we used to have these discussions. If we can have discussion and peaceful engagement with people from other faiths and other religions who don't even agree on the same book as us, then why can we not have peaceful and civil dialogue and discussion and engagement with people of our own community, our own religion, our own faith group? If the situation has become such that we are shunning and we're not prepared to listen and engage with people of our own community, then what has the world come down to? So in any case, he made a very good point, this respected speaker and Sheikh, about the importance of remaining calm. And even if you have disagreements, he said disagreements are not a big deal. Disagreements and differences of opinion become a problem when they become a source of division and hatred and animosity and suspicion within our communities. So we should not allow that to happen. It's a good, sound advice. We accept it and we endorse it. And in fact, there is a lot more that can be said. There's actually a whole branch of reform that can be opened just on this point, inshallah. We don't want to open it right now because we have other points that we want to focus, but this is one of the critical blunders that has been made by different sects in this ummah, is that what the sects unfortunately did was they differed among each other, which is okay. It is inevitable. You can't have an ummah of intellectual clones who all robotically think the same things and have the same views. So it was okay if there was difference of opinion in the ummah. But then the mistake that was made was that these sects, they separated completely from each other. So that now, subhanallah, every sect has its own masjid, it has its own centers, it has its own graveyard in some cases. Yani even in death you cannot afford to be with those other. There's so much hatred and venom among the factions, the different rival factions within the ummah. This is what is wrong. You could have your differences of opinion and still be part of the same ummah. But unfortunately, differences were exploited and they were made a source for creating sects and rival cults within the ummah. Khair, that is a different mabhath and different discussion that we inshallah hope to cover. It's, we believe, very important. But for now, we want to address some of the points that the respected speaker raised in his majlis. So he was talking about how to deal with reformist voices. What should you do? What should the approach be? What do the Quran and Ahlul Bayt ﷺ teach us with regard to how to deal with these voices of reform? So the first evidence that he actually presented from the Ahlul Bayt is the statement of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali bin Abi Talib salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi from Nahj al-Balagha. This is the first maxim that is attributed to Amir al-Mu'mineen, in which he says, "Kun fil fitani kabni al-labuni لا ظهر فيركب ولا ضرع فيحلب. That during fitan, during civil or political disturbances, you should behave and try to become like a baby camel, a 2-year-old camel. What's so special about the 2-year-old camel? Imam says the special thing about it is that لا ظهر فيركب. A 2-year-old camel is practically useless. That's what Imam is saying. When you have civil disturbances, political disturbances, riot-like situations, when people are mindlessly and aimlessly fighting against each other. Remember, the commentators have clarified, this is not every fitna Imam is talking about. This is only applicable to specific fitan, which in the Arabic sources we refer to as al-fitan al-amya, blind fitna yani. For no reason, all of a sudden 2 factions start fighting. You don't even know who is on haqq, who is on batil, why are they fighting, what is their cause. You don't know anything. Now, some people in the crowd, their tendency is they see 2 people fighting, they'll just dive into it straight away without even investigating what's going on, what's the fight about. They will just get into the brawl. This is what Imam is warning against. He's saying, no, this is not the wise thing to do. Rather, in such disturbances, the wise thing to do is kun kabni labuni, kun fil fitnati kabni labuni, be like that baby camel, which is practically useless. Why is it useless? Because la zahrun fayurkab, it does not have a strong enough back that anyone can mount it. So you can't use, this camel is of no use to you practically, as long as it's alive. You cannot use it, you cannot sit on it, because it's not strong enough to carry weight. On the other hand, wala dar'un fayuhlab, it also doesn't have any udders. The udders have not grown, so you cannot even get milk from it. So can you imagine a baby camel? You can't get milk from it, and you can't sit on it. It's useless. That's what Imam is saying, is that in blind and mindless fitan, this is how you should become. You should not go out and join one party or the other. Rather, lock yourself in your home until the situation becomes clear exactly what's going on. Don't just jump into the fitan headlong. So unfortunately, this respected speaker, he misapplied this statement. Imam is not talking about intellectual fitan or fitan where it's a case between haqq and batil, where it's a case between tawheed and shirk, for example. Otherwise, if you misapply this statement, then basically is Imam Ali trying to say that, for example, when the Holy Prophet emerged in Mecca, do you know what's the first thing that the people of Mecca popularized and made famous? The first rumor they spread about the Holy Prophet was what? Is that he's creating fitna. The biggest accusation against Rasulullah in Mecca in the early period was what? Yeah, go and read the books of Seerah and history. The kuffar and mushrikeen of Mecca, their number one argument against him was he's a big fitna, this person. He is separating father from son and son from father. He's turning brother against brother. He has brought a completely new religion different from what our forefathers were on. And those of our brothers and sisters and parents and elders who are accepting his path, their lifestyle, their culture, everything is changing. They're becoming different from us. He's creating division within our community. So when the Holy Prophet emerged, was that a test from Allah? Absolutely. Allah was testing the people of Mecca. How many of you accept the haqq? How many of you accept the batil? But you can't apply this statement of Amirul Mu'mineen to that situation and say, well, the people should have acted like a baby camel. They should neither have supported the Prophet, nor should they have supported the kuffar and mushrikeen of Mecca. They should have remained neutral. And indeed, some people did remain neutral, but Allah doesn't praise them in the Quran. Similarly, if someone tries to apply this, if you take this hadith or this statement, that kun fil fitnati, this is not talking about every fitna. Otherwise, Yazid was a big fitna in this ummah. All of us will agree, right? So why did Imam al-Hussein not act like a baby camel? Wal-'iyadhu billah. Why did he not say that, I'll neither support those who are speaking out against him, nor will I support him. I'll just stay neutral, lock myself in my house. You, the ummah, let the ummah decide for itself. No, he actually rose up. لِطَلَبِ الْإِصْلَاحِ فِي أُمَّةِ جَدِّي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَآلِهِ وسلم. He said, no, I will not sit quiet. This is a matter of haqq versus batil. This is a matter of adl versus zulm. I cannot keep quiet. So I'm afraid, and I submit this very humbly and with all due respect, that this particular statement of Amir al-Mu'mineen, kun fil fitnati kabni labuni, la zahrun fayurkab, wala dar'un fayuhlab. Don't misapply it. Don't apply it to situations where it does not fit. He's not even talking about every fitna here. He's talking about, and that's why, if you don't trust me, this is what all commentators have said. This is an English version, Nahjul Balagha, which is easily accessible to everyone. I'm reading it to you, page 604. This is the translation of Syed Ali Hur with introductory notes by Syed Muhammad Askari Ja'fari. Look at what they write in the commentary. They say Laboon means a milk camel, and Ibn al-Laboon means it's 2-year-old young. In this age, the young is neither suitable for riding nor does it have udders which could be milked. It is called Ibn al-Laboon because in this period of 2 years its mother bears another young and begins yielding milk again. The intention is that during civil disturbance, so this is the first thing you need to note. He's trying to apply this to intellectual trials and tribulations. Imam is not talking about intellectual trials and tribulations. He's talking about civil disturbances, when there is mindless violence and thuggery going on. Okay, let's say there's a riot in the city, or there is civil disturbance, where the haqq and batil is not clear. It's not evident what's going on. So they say the intention is that during civil disturbance or trouble, a man should behave in such a manner that he may be regarded as being of no consequence, and he should be ignored. Yani you should not be a prominent person. When a fitna emerges, avoid, try to follow a low key, maintain a low profile. No need should be felt for his participation in either party. Because if you put yourself out there, then people will try to draw you into the fitna. One party will say, come and join us. Another party will say, come and join us. You don't know who is on haqq and who is on batil. So how can you join them, right? So this is because during mischief, only disassociation can save from molestation. Now listen to them. They say, of course, when the clash is between right and wrong, it is not permissible to keep aloof, nor can it be called civil disturbance. But on such occasions, it is obligatory to rise up for the support of right and suppression of wrong. For example, during the battles of Jamal and Siffin, it was obligatory to support the right and to fight against the wrong, and they have ended it here, but we would add in Karbala as well. Because in Karbala also, there were many people who isolated themselves. There were actually some Sahaba also who followed this isolationist approach. They tried to act like the Ibn al-Laboon. But here, we would say that applying the statement of Amir al-Mu'mineen to a situation like Karbala would be misapplying it. Karbala is not a situation where you lock yourself inside the house and say, you know what, let the ummah butcher and mercilessly massacre the grandson of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What do I care? They will have to answer for this on the Day of Judgment. This is none of my business. No. Rather, in a situation like Karbala, you will see the truly loyal Sahaba of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam who were committed to him and who had received his guidance on this matter. Look at how they behaved. Anas ibn al-Harath, or in other versions, Anas ibn al-Harith al-Kahili al-Asadi, was a senior citizen. He was a Sahabi of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam who had reached an extremely advanced age when Imam al-Hussein set out for Karbala alayhi salatu wasalam. And yet, as soon as he learned about this, he came and he joined Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam in Karbala. And he fought alongside, defending Imam al-Hussein and his Ahlul Bayt in Karbala. And when he was asked about this, he said, I heard Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam saying, Inna waladi al-Hussein yuqtalu bi ardi al-Iraq, ala faman shahida minkum falyansurhu. My son al-Hussein will be killed in the land of Iraq. Any one of you who witnesses this should go to his help. He should help him out. He should defend him. He should support him. So here, Karbala-like situations where it's a battle between haqq and batil, truth and falsehood, or Rasulullah-like situations where it is between tawheed and shirk, between iman and kufr, there you don't act like an Ibn al-Laboon. You don't act like a 2-year-old camel. Rather, you side with the haqq and you oppose the batil after you have determined what the haqq is and what the batil is. So that is the first submission that we have to make in this regard. To apply the hadith of, or the statement or narration of Ibn al-Labun to the case of reform is misapplication. You cannot apply this statement here, because when it comes to reform, it's a matter of haqq and batil. The scholars who are asking us to reform, they are doing so in light of the Quran and the teachings of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wassalam. They are inviting us to abandon those of our beliefs and practices which clearly contradict Allah's revelations, the Sunnah of the Prophet, the established Sunnah and Seerah of his Ahlul Bayt. When they are asking us to stay away from these things, then this is not a position to say that, well, I'm a 2-year-old camel, I have nothing to do with this. No, you have to do something with this because it affects you. If you don't reform yourself, you will have to answer for that on the Day of Judgment, and you will suffer the consequences of that on the Day of Judgment. So you cannot afford to remain neutral when it's a clash between haqq and batil. That's the first point. And then surprisingly from this, the respected speaker tries to derive the idea that the advice of Imam Ali alayhi salam is that whenever a new idea emerges, so for example, this is how he was trying to put it. It's very surprising that if you've been hearing something for the last 50 years of your life, and then some new scholar or researcher emerges and tells you that what you've been hearing and listening to for the last 50 years of your life is wrong, it is not supported by evidence. He tries to interpret this statement of Amir al-Mu'mineen, which is not even about intellectual trials and tribulations. It's about civil unrest and political fitan. And even if you want to apply it to intellectual fitan, it would be about those intellectual fitan where the haqq and batil is not clear. It's mindless debates and discussions going on where no clear vision exists as to what is right and who is wrong and who is with the Quran and who is going against the Quran. But he's applying it here and saying, well, if you've been hearing a certain narrative, let's say the traditional narrative for the last 50, 60, 70 years of your life, and then you hear some new reformist voices telling you to question some of these things, and they present you with evidence from the Quran and Hadith that counters some of these beliefs and practices, he somehow derives from this statement of Amir al-Mu'mineen that what Amir al-Mu'mineen is trying to say is that you reject the new ideas and you stick to what you had inherited from your forefathers and from your community and what you grew up with. This is a completely illogical idea that, first of all, Amir al-Mu'mineen is not trying to convey to you. This is not the intent of this statement from Amir al-Mu'mineen. He's trying to help you navigate through civil disturbances which were rife during his time. What we are faced with is a situation where ghulu is penetrating our communities. The advice of the Ahlul Bayt with regard to the ghulat and the spread of ghulu is not to act and not to become like Ibn al-Labun. The advice of the Ahlul Bayt in the face of ghulu is not that you should shut yourself in your house and be like, you know what, I'm not going to do anything about this. No, the Imams of Ahlul Bayt have appealed to us and they have asked for our support in combating and destroying this movement of ghulu intellectually. How? They give us an intellectual weapon and filter, that is the Quran. That is what you see all the Imams of Ahlul Bayt who talk about ghulu. This is their number one advice to the people. It's not that, the ghulat are spreading fabricated ahadith about us. They are transferring the sifat of Allah, giving us the unique divine attributes of Allah, and you just stay shush. Let them promote all these lies about us. Let them promote all the iftiras. Believe in those iftiras if you want to believe in, and it will all be cool on the Day of Judgment. Ya akhi, iftiras are not a joke. When you make false claims about Allah, Allah threatens you on the Day of Judgment. Tallahi, la tus'alunna yawm al-qiyamati amma kuntum taftarun. Allah says, He swears by Himself. Allah says, Tallahi, I swear by Allah. Allah says, I swear by Allah. La tus'alunna yawm al-qiyamati amma kuntum taftarun. You shall most certainly be questioned on the Day of Judgment about every iftira and every false claim you made about me. Every claim you made about me for which you didn't have valid evidence, you didn't have sultan and authorization from me to make that claim, I will question you about it. Don't think for a second I will let you go. I'll let you walk free. So these trials and tribulations, you can't just act neutral and get to safety. No, you have to evaluate the evidences. The Imams, in the face of the fitna of the ghulat, they did not say become Ibn al-Labun. Rather, they said strengthen your connection with the Quran. Read the Quran more closely. Try to understand the Quran. And use your understanding of the Quran to discredit and reject all the ahadith which are being attributed to us which don't agree with it. And that's what Yunus ibn Abdul Rahman, Ridwanullahi alayh, the companion of Imam al-Rida alayhi salam, who received and transmitted this instruction of the Imam to us, this is what he himself practically did. And this is the example we are all being called upon to follow. Yunus ibn Abdul Rahman did not become Ibn al-Labun. There were two great fitan at least that happened in his life. One was the fitna of the Waqifiyya, the false agents of Imam Musa ibn Ja'far al-Kadhim alayhi salam, his false and mendacious nuwab, who were claiming that he has not died and that people should continue to surrender funds in the name of the Imam to them. Did Yunus ibn Abdul Rahman say, oh, the Waqifa, actually they formed a whole sect, a deviant sect within Shi'ism, and they attracted so many of the Shi'as, the innocent, simple-minded Shi'as of the Imams, they attracted them towards themselves. And they turned them against Imam al-Rida alayhi salam. They got them and deceived them into rejecting his scholarship and his authority. So that the Waqifa did not give any value to Imam al-Rida alayhi salam. They said, he's nobody to us. We follow the agents and the trusted companions of Imam al-Kazim alayhi salam. We will not follow this new Imam. So the first was the fitna of the Waqifa. Did Yunus ibn Abdul Rahman act like Ibn al-Labun? Did he become a 2-year-old camel and say, you know what, I'm just going to shut myself inside my house? This is big fitna, and it's within the Shia community. You have two groups. One is saying Imam al-Rida, one is saying the Waqifa. I'm just going to, keep myself mum about this. No. Yunus ibn Abdul Rahman, when he was actually challenged and pursued by the deviant agents, they said, why are you so active campaigning against us? We can offer you money in order for you to shut your mouth. Why don't you come and join us? He said, أَلَيْسَ رَوَيْنَا عَنِ الصَّادِقِينَ عَلَيْهِمُ السَّلَامُ أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم قال إذا ظهرت البدع في أمتي فليظهر العالم علمه فإن لم يفعل فعليه لعنة الله. He said, have we not narrated from the pious, righteous, truthful ones, the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, when innovations and bid'ahs enter into my community and my ummah, the one who has knowledge should expose them. He should speak out against them. He should combat them intellectually and academically. But you have to set the record straight. And whoever, despite having knowledge, doesn't do this, فَعَلَيْهِ لَعْنَةُ اللَّهِ, then he receives the la'na and the malediction and disapproval of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So yes, when it's between haqq and batil, then you have no option. You have to take sides. You have to support the haqq and act against the batil. So that is point number one. Point number two, he says, so this whole idea that you should reject any new idea, that if it goes against what you've been hearing for the last 50 years from the mimbar, just reject it. This logically does not make sense. Because you see, any advice or solution that you give should be universally valid, right? It shouldn't be something that you can selectively apply here, but if it should work for one community, it should work for another community as well. Now think about it. Reform, these people are mistaken in thinking that reform is only happening in our community, in our sect. No, reform is happening everywhere. In the Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah, the mainstream Muslim Ummah, there are many reformist scholars there also. They're spearheading reform. So, mainstream, there is reform going on in mainstream, yes. On what? On things like Adalatul Sahaba, for example. Under sectarian influences, the Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah, for example, they inserted things into the Aqidah that are actually not really backed up by the Quran and authentic ahadith. And so the reformists on the side of the Ahlul Sunnah, they are trying to correct this situation. They're trying to correct the mistakes that have been made in history, for example. Many of the Ahlul Sunnah have been misled and deceived into glorifying and venerating wicked and wretched personalities like Yazid bin Muawiyah, for example. Unfortunately, very small number, microscopic minority among the Ahlul Sunnah who actually glorify Yazid, but they are there. Unfortunately, they have been brainwashed and fed with propaganda, because of which they actually say radiyallahu anhu after his name, or they regard him as Amirul Mu'mineen. So there are reformers on the side of the Ahlul Sunnah who are trying to correct that. There are reformers on the side of Ahlul Sunnah who have set the record straight on Muawiyah bin Abi Sufyan. There are reformers on the side of Ahlul Sunnah who have set the record straight on the fada'il of Ahlul Bayt, the genuine, legitimate, non-ghulu fada'il of Ahlul Bayt, which should be accepted by all Muslims because they are backed by the evidences. But unfortunately, in some segments and some sections of the Ahlul Sunnah, those fada'il, those legitimate fada'il have been rejected. So reformers in the Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah are trying to bring the sahih ahadith and authentic ahadith from the Sihah al-Sitta and other masanid and jawami', and they're trying to show the Ahlul Sunnah that Baba, Ahlul Bayt have a special position. They have great fada'il, so they are doing reform. So now if we take this respected Shaykh's advice, if let's say a Sunni were to be listening to this respected Shaykh, and if he were to follow the advice that the respected Shaykh is giving, you think he would ever be able to arrive at the truth? Because what is the Shaykh saying? First of all, whenever there is reform, whenever a Shaykh or a speaker or a preacher or a scholar appears and he tells you the opposite of what you've been listening for the last 50 years, avoid him, reject him, shun him, stay away from him. So now if a Sunni hears this, for 50 years, let's say in his masjid, the local preacher has been telling him, the local Shaykh has been telling him that Yazid was radiyallahu anhu, he was part of the mission to Qustantiniya and he was a very noble person, and for 50 years he's been hearing this propaganda. All of a sudden he hears a reformist Sunni scholar saying, no, Baba, Yazid is the killer of the grandson of Rasulullah, he was a drunkard, he was this, he was that. So according to the advice of this respected Shaykh, the Sunni should do what? He should say, this is what the Shaykh is saying, is that he should say, no, this is a new idea. These people who are vilifying and condemning Yazid and disassociating from him, the new idea, this is a completely new idea. So I will reject it, I will shun it, because it does not match with what my preachers have been telling me for the last 50 years. Do you think it would be reasonable? Do you think it would be a nice idea for a Sunni to think like this? When the Sunni scholars, they open the file on Muawiyah, when they open the file on Yazid, when they open the file on Banu Umayyah and Banu Abbas, you think a Sunni should say, these reformists, Baba, they are telling us stuff that our mainstream Sunni mashayikh don't tell us in their sermons. So we should shun them, we should avoid them. Number one. Number two, his advice is, go and ask any scholar that you trust. If a Sunni goes and asks, let's say he trusts one of the disciples or students of Ibn Baz or Ibn Uthaymeen or some of the other Salafi shuyukh, if he goes and asks them that, Baba, there are reformists within our Sunni community who are telling us Yazid was not a good person. Imam al-Hussein was justified in his stance in Karbala. He was inviting people towards a haqq. What will the traditional Sunni scholar tell? He'll say, Baba, don't listen to these reformists. They're deviant Rafidah. That's the interesting thing I mentioned before, is that there is this unwritten agreement between the Shias and Sunnis, mashallah. The traditional camp on both sides, there's an unwritten agreement with them, that anyone who tries to reform, we will label them with the label of the opposite community. So anyone who tries to reform Sunnism, he is immediately branded a Rafidi and a Shia, even though he does not believe and agree in any of the distinguishing beliefs of the Shia. But still, to turn people away from him, they'll say he's a Shia, don't listen to him. The same thing is happening on our side. Or any scholar comes and challenges anything that we consider, that we are familiar with, even though he presents evidence from Quran and Hadith, and doesn't matter. If it is not in line with what we have inherited from our forefathers, with what we've been listening from the Mimbar for the past 50 years, what do? We say, ato Wahhabi che, ne a Sunni che, ne Salafi che, ne non-Shia che. You expel him from your group and you say he belongs to the other community. And that's happening on that side as well. But when it happens on that side, You say, this does not seem right. When it happens on your side, mashallah, it is okay. Khair. So our nasiha is that we are not saying don't ask the scholars. Asking the scholars, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ, if you go by that verse, yes, but the verse says فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ. It does not say اقبلوا ما يقوله أهل الذِّكْرِ. It doesn't say Allah does not judge you by the questions that you ask, right? For asking your questions, you can ask whoever you want to ask. But then Allah will judge you by the answers you accept. Be careful about that. So we don't stop you from asking any scholar. Go to any scholar you like, traditional, reformist, whatever. Ask them. No one is stopping you from asking. But then be careful. When they give answers, this is where we say you have to be careful. Problem is not in asking the question. Problem is when you get the response. The response should be supported by the clear of the Quran. It should be in line with the established sunnah of the Prophet. It should be in line with the established teaching of the Ahlul Bayt, which in itself now is very difficult because the ghulat have turned things upside down. What the things that Ahlul Bayt rejected, they have made them into Aqidah. What the Ahlul Bayt accepted, they are now saying that this is believing in what the Ahlul Bayt preached. They are saying this is Wahhabi Aqidah, or this is Sunni Aqidah, or this is this. So now things have been turned upside down, so it's much more difficult and complicated. But yeah, ultimately you don't have a choice. You cannot afford to just, close your ears. Because if you close your ears and don't listen to what's being said, it's your loss at the end of the day. It's not anyone else's loss. If on the day of judgment you find out that you were wrong, then what will you do? So afazali, better you study all the sides, you listen to every side, isolate their evidences, and then put them under your own microscope, use your aql, use your understanding of the Quran, and then judge. And then, doesn't matter, even if you arrive at a wrong conclusion, at least you can stand in the court of Allah and face Him and say, Allah, it's not that I ignored the guidance. No. I sincerely and honestly evaluated the evidences of both sides, and ultimately I got convinced by the evidences of this side, so I accepted them. So at least you have something to say in the court of God. But if you just keep listening to one side of the story, you grow up listening to one narrative, you die on that narrative, and then guess what? On the day of judgment, if you find out that narrative was wrong, then what? So that's why don't shut people out. Don't avoid the advice that's being given to people is avoid the reformers like the plague. Well, you do so to your own detriment. The reformers are not going to lose anything by that, especially since their only goal is to clear themselves of blame in the court of Allah. The person who stands to lose, if you close your ears and your eyes to the guidance, the loss is yours. You're doing so to your own detriment and to your own loss. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give our communities and our community members the tawfiq to distinguish between the truth and the falsehood, to accept the truth and shun all that is false. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين والسلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Thank you for watching. Please consider subscribing. Also click the bell icon and choose the all option to get notified for upcoming videos automatically.